and welcome to the Sales and Marketing Playbook. Today, in episode 7, we're going to talk about probably one of the most important elements of a networking event or even a cold call. Evan's going to take the lead on this, and trust me, you want to stay tuned.
Welcome to the Sales and Marketing Playbook Unleashed, the premier podcast for innovative growth strategies, hosted by 2 seasoned experts. Meet Evan Polin, the president of Polin Performance Group, a master in sales coaching with over 2 decades of experience. Evan is not just a consultant, he's a force in sales, focusing on mindset, planning, and skill development. He's also the co-author of Selling Professional Services the Sandler Way. Joining him is Craig Andrews, partner and CEO of Beholder Agency, an expert in growth marketing. With 20 years under his belt, Craig blends marketing creativity with strategy to propel businesses forward, making Beholder Agency a leader in effective marketing solutions. Together, Evan and Craig are here to share their wisdom on winning strategies, best practices, and transformative insights that will fuel your growth. Get ready to revolutionize your sales and marketing approach right here on the Sales and Marketing Playbook Unleashed.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sales and Marketing Playbook Unleashed. I'm Craig Andrews, and my partner in crime there, Evan Polin. Today, we're going to talk to you guys about probably one of the most important aspects of networking and or sales calls. And Evan, I'm not going to spoil it anymore. I'm going to give it to you. I'm not going to spoil it. What is the most important thing when it comes to networking events?
So, Craig, we're going to get to that in a second, but I got to admonish you a little bit. I thought we talked about this before we rolled out the episodes. We're supposed to set the bar low so that we can crawl right over it. You're saying, hey, this is one of the most important things. Stay tuned. I'm feeling under a lot of pressure. So
you are under a lot of pressure. Yes, because you are the man, and I got to make sure people know.
So let's kind of illustrate the importance of the elevator pitch. Some people call it the elevator pitch, the 30-second commercial, however you may want to call it. But Craig, I want you to think back to a networking event. Let me know if this has ever happened to you. You get to an event, somebody comes over, starts talking to you, and their introduction turns into a 3, 4, 5-minute monologue. They haven't taken a breath yet. When somebody's coming up to you, somebody's really pitching you hard when you're at an event, how do you feel?
Confused. I would say that I'm going, who else can I get to help me get out of this conversation?
So I've got my pocket's got to be ringing, or I've got to see somebody way over there who I need to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
A mistake that a lot of people make, whether it's networking events, we'll talk about an elevator pitch a little bit as we get to cold calling as well, is they are out there, and people who aren't really sophisticated, people who are newer at sales, or sometimes people who are desperate at selling, they're trying to close somebody while they're at the appointment, while they're having the very first conversation with someone. The first thing we all need to keep in mind with an elevator pitch with a 30-second commercial, it is a conversation opener and it is a relationship starter. Very few of us are going to close a deal in the first 2 to 3 minutes that we're having a conversation with somebody. The 30-second commercial, the elevator pitch, it's a way to open up the conversation. If I'm at a networking event, it's a way to quickly qualify or disqualify the person that I'm speaking with to help me determine, is this somebody that I want to spend more time with? And is this a potential customer? Or is this a really nice person, but somebody who's really not going to be a good fit for me? And again, if I'm at a networking event, I may know to very quickly move on from that conversation. So, Craig, question for you. How frequently in your career have you closed a deal within the first 3 minutes of meeting somebody for the first time?
There was that time. Never. No, never once.
I'm disappointed. I thought you were good.
No, I'm not that good. I'm not that good, Evan.
So for the overwhelming majority, 99.5% of people out there, we're not going to close a deal in the first 2 to 3 minutes we're talking to somebody. We're making that first impression. We're kind of sharing with folks who we are, what we do, really important, how we help our potential clients. And that's really what we need to focus on when we're doing our elevator pitch.
So real quick, Evan, when that has happened, when you've really found somebody who does it well, other than yourself, what type of feedback have you heard from that?
So when somebody does a really good 30-second commercial, the way you'll know if you're doing a good 30-second commercial, if somebody stops you halfway through and goes, well, wait a second, Craig, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Wait, how do you do that? Geez, we're running into a lot of those kinds of things. That's when you know you've got them hooked and you've really started the conversation. An analogy that I use all the time when talking about an elevator pitch or a 30-second commercial, it's like a resume for somebody looking for a job. The resume is never going to get the person the job. It's going to get the potential employer interested enough to want to learn more, to call somebody in for an interview, to learn more about the candidate, to see if they might want to hire them. It's the same thing with the elevator pitch. Almost nobody out there is going to close a deal based on the elevator pitch, but it's going to get that prospect to go, do I want to spend 3, 4, 5 minutes talking with this person to learn a little bit more about what they do, to see if their product, to see if their service is something that we might be able to use? So that's really the ultimate goal with this elevator pitch, is to start the conversation and either get somebody to raise their hand and go, wait a second, tell me a little bit more about that. How do you do that? We might need that. Or for them to go, yeah, geez, none of that really resonates with me. None of those things are problems that I really have. And then now we know that we may quickly want to move on and talk to the next person.
So, I would say in kind of a bit of a contrast, slightly off topic, we would use those as, from a marketing perspective, as good feeders, right? From an online perspective and so forth. I know that a lot of times when you're talking about elevator pitches or sales pitches, a lot of that work would have been done somewhat beforehand from a marketing perspective. But you're talking about actually being there in front of them and kind of supporting that marketing message, right?
Supporting that marketing message. And actually, you bring up an excellent point. When at all possible, before I launch in and talk to somebody about what I do, when I can, I will ask them what they do first.
Good
because point. Almost like that, getting some of that marketing information, if I can learn that they are the managing partner of a law firm versus the owner of a manufacturer distribution company versus an individual contributor sales rep, I can now tailor that elevator pitch to my audience and to who I'm speaking with. If I'm not asking that question up front, if I can't learn about that up front, I'm shooting in the dark a little bit. And we can talk a little bit about how you may have a more general commercial when you're shooting in the dark and you don't really know who you're talking to, versus having a really fine-tuned, honed-in elevator pitch if you know exactly who it is you're speaking with. But if you can know that up front, for those of you out there who may be making lots and lots of cold calls, if you can do just a tiny bit of research before you make that call, identify what type of client you're reaching out to. And again, if your marketing has done a really good job kind of creating those different avatars, you should know up front before you pick up the phone exactly what avatar you're reaching out to. If you can be really specific with the elevator pitch, it's going to get you much better results.
Yeah.
Which actually goes to one of my first tips.
Okay.
With the elevator pitch, with the 30-second commercial, you do not want to just have one commercial. You don't want to memorize a commercial. You don't want to read off a script. If so, you will sound scripted and you will turn off the other person. You need to be very conversational, have a couple bullet points. And let me give you an example. And Craig, unfortunately, I think this is going to age us out a little bit to some of our listening audience. But I think it's something important. Do you remember when, going back 15, 20 years ago here, do you remember getting that telemarketing call at home before we all had caller ID, before there was the 5 to 10 second delay in terms of that person's voice popping up on the phone? When you picked up the phone, how long did it take for you to identify that it was somebody cold calling you, when you picked up the phone?
It was very difficult to know. I wouldn't have known years ago.
Really? Because when I would get a telemarketing call, I'd be able to pick that up in 3 seconds. I wouldn't even know what the person was selling. but I
Correct.
could tell that they were either reading off of a script or they had memorized the script. And I did one of two things
Yeah.
when I got that tonality. First, if it was just a regular day, I'd just hang up. Again, they could have been selling me something I really needed at half of what I was paying. I never let them get that far because I felt salesperson, automatically click to, mentally covering my wallet, going to hang up the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
On days when I was a little bit bored, days when I had more time, I'd hand the phone over to my 3-year-old and let that salesperson try to sell to my 3-year-old for a couple minutes before hanging up the phone.
So you are an active torturer of telemarketers, is what you're telling me.
Potentially.
Okay.
So torture may be a little strong, but I'd like to help them make their days a little bit more interesting.
Now, you're telling me that you never gave them sales advice when you caught one of them on the line.
They just never seem to be open
Okay.
to feedback and hearing suggestions.
Okay. That's fair.
1 or 2 times when I gave them a couple tips and suggested they call back a day or two late, I never got that return phone call.
Okay. Well, that's one way to do it. Yes.
So going back to the main thread, though, we don't want to memorize our elevator pitch, our 30-second commercial. We want to keep in mind, okay, what problems do I solve for my clients?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help? What's going to resonate with the other person? And then make sure that your messaging follows through with that. I've been doing what I'm doing now for more years than I want to admit, maybe 23, 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
My elevator pitch, my introduction never sounds exactly the same any 2 times. I'll fumble over a couple words, which is perfectly fine. Makes you come across as a real live human being and not kind of a robocall telemarketer.
Absolutely.
But I really just focus on the problems that I solve. And for me personally, and for all of you, I want you to think about the different audiences you're in front of. I can work with small businesses and solopreneurs, and I can work with really large organizations. The elevator pitch for an individual for me sounds a lot different than it does for a large company. I work with service firms like law firms, accounting firms, financial services companies.
Mm-hmm.
I work with distributors. The elevator pitch for a service business sounds a lot different than the elevator pitch for a distributor. So for me personally, again, especially if I can find out a little bit about the person before I start talking,
Yep.
which again is, if at all possible, when I'm in a live event, I'm going to ask them what they do first. I can then modify what I'm going to say based on the industry the person's in, based on the size of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking to a president, the things that matter to a president or a business owner were much different than what matters to an individual salesperson. So I am really molding my message to who I'm speaking with. And if you can start to do that, and it takes some time and it takes some practice, you will find that you're going to have more people raise their hand and say, wait, Craig, tell me a little bit more about that. How do you help them? Geez, we're running into the same problems.
Yep.
And then you're off to the races in terms of starting to build that relationship, qualify that opportunity. And this may be a good, first a question for you, and then what I may do is kind of model a couple of different commercials.
Okay.
But Craig, from the marketing side,
Yeah.
for different companies, might they want to show up differently based on the medium where they're advertising in? May they want their website to look a little bit different than their LinkedIn presence, which might look a little bit different to what they're doing on Facebook. Yep. And with targeted ads, might one set of ads look one way for one kind of avatar of a client, but if they're also looking for another one, might that look different?
Without a doubt. I mean, similar to what we talked about in other episodes, you have different avatars who are on different mediums. For instance, myself, I might be more an Instagram lover. Somebody else might be more of a LinkedIn lover. Somebody else might be on Twitter most of their time. And so your message has to kind of cater to who those people are. And so it kind of piggybacks onto your point in terms of how you would speak to a CEO is different how you might speak to a salesperson, for sure.
Yeah. And again, with elevator pitches, and there's different, but I have a client right now that I'm working with, a managed services provider, IT company. Mm-hmm. They're focusing on, they work within schools and school systems. They work with manufacturing companies. They work with nonprofits. They work with law firms and accounting firms.
All different avatars.
All different avatars, all completely different messages.
Hmm.
So it's important that they have the right message for the right audience.
Absolutely.
And
And even their pains that they would have. So technically, okay, so I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here a little bit. So technically, going back to the point that you said before you said in terms of messaging that you need to be in a situation where you don't memorize it. Now, theoretically, you have some feeds of or some threads between there that's all consistent to allow people not to have to memorize it, correct?
correct. For most people I work with, they're never shocked at why a client works with them. There's typically 3 or 4 or 5 problems that their product or their service solves for their client.
Hmm.
So I just need to keep in mind, okay, why do people work with me? What are the major problems that I solve? And again, it might sound a little bit different. You might use different words based on different industries, but for the most part, it's going to be the same 3 to 5.
Hmm.
So that's how you're able to just kind of keep in mind, okay, these are the 5 or 6 different problems that I solve. If I'm talking to this industry, I'm going to pull these 3. If I'm talking to this industry, I'm going to pull these 3.
Hmm.
And the other thing, and I know that you and your firm work with professional services firms as well. The other thing that I'll sometimes work with my clients on is, let's say that I'm working with an attorney. And let's say that attorney is in litigation.
Hmm.
Well, it's really hard to go out to a networking event and go up and ask if people have just been sued or they're ready to sue someone.
Hmm.
But if they are with a firm that's got multiple different practice areas, they may go in with their elevator pitch and talk about 1 or 2 problems that they help their clients with when it comes to litigation. But then they may mention 2 or 3 problems that the firm solves for their clients.
Yep.
So that way, if somebody doesn't have a litigation matter right away, they might say, well, oh, wait a second, you guys are a full service firm. Might you be able to help me with X, Y, Z? And now that attorney can identify an opportunity that may be great for the firm that they can hand off to one of their partners. But if they had gone in with such a narrow focus that I'm only looking for people who need litigation, the chances that they come out of those events with work would be few and far between.
Got it. So you want to keep it broad enough so that when you get to the situation of the 30-second commercial in the networking event, you have a reason to do the follow-up call once you get back to your office.
Absolutely. Or even better, if you're doing it right, you can have had then the next 5 to 7 minutes of a conversation with somebody to go, you know what, that's not the right person for me to follow up with, because based on what I shared, they don't run into any of those issues. They don't run into any of those problems. So really nice person. Maybe I'll see them if I go back to that organization, but no need to follow up with that one. But this person over here, their eyes lit up when I talked about how I help different clients, and they started sharing with me how they're running into a couple of those issues. So if we didn't schedule an appointment right there and then, because these days everybody's got their mobile devices with them, you know that within the next day or two, and best practice, we don't want to wait more than 48 hours. We're going to follow up with that specific person with specific talking points based on the conversation that we had with them and the issues that we identify that they may be running into that we can help them with.
That makes a lot of sense. So you touched upon something there that I thought was very valid, and I want to make sure it gets the emphasis it deserves. Part of the elevator pitch is to determine if they don't qualify for what you're going to, right? So that should be your little red ticker that says this person may not be one, wrong word, valuable, but time spent on them in that networking event, you need to spend less time with, is ultimately the point.
Absolutely. For me personally, I'm bringing a pen into an event with me. And again, if somebody's physically giving me a card, I'm writing on the back, 1 or 2 notes. Hey, this is what they look like. Hey, these were the problems that they have, and this is what we talked about to follow up with them. Or hey, Craig was a nice guy. There's really no fit. No need to follow up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll put them into the CRM so that if we've got a newsletter or something like that, that goes out. And if things change for him, maybe he reaches out, but not one that makes sense to actively reach out to.
That makes sense.
Craig, do you think it would be helpful for me to kind of give a very traditional elevator pitch that has some of the mistakes that people make?
I'm up for it. I'm up for the challenge. Let's go.
So what I'm going to do is model 2 things.
Okay.
First is a traditional elevator pitch. Then I'll give the kind of elevator pitch that I typically give to see if you can notice any differences between the two.
Okay.
to really help folks with, again, some of the nuances that they might want to consider when they're out there talking to folks.
Okay. Okay.
So my first elevator pitch, this will be a very traditional pitch. May get you that person that starts to kind of fade out a little bit. But a very traditional elevator pitch might sound like this, and I'll do it for myself and for my own firm. So a traditional elevator pitch might sound like this. Hi, my name is Evan Polin. I'm the president of Polin Performance Group. Polin Performance Group is located in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I have a sales coaching and sales consulting firm, and I work with people who are looking to grow and increase their businesses. So I will work with people and provide coaching, consulting, training around how do we get in front of more of the right opportunities and what should that sales plan look like. I'll work with folks on how do we best qualify or disqualify opportunities. I'll help teach people how they can do a better job at getting referrals and introductions. I'll work with people individually. I'll work with people in groups. And I'm really looking to work with companies and work with firms that are looking to drive revenue. So if you know of anybody who's looking to bring in more business, I'd love to have a conversation with them. So that's a traditional pitch.
That's traditional. Okay. I'm with you.
Okay. Let me give you the kind of pitch that I typically give.
This is a pitch that you would normally give when you're out in networking.
This is what I might do if I'm out at a networking event, out at a trade show.
Okay.
And again, after I've asked the other person what they do, I'll say, hey, my name's Evan. My firm is Polin Performance Group. And I help business owners and managing partners of small to mid-sized firms who are frustrated because they're just not growing their business as quickly as they would like. A lot of the firms and the companies I help, they know that they do great work, but when they meet new prospects, it takes way longer than it should to close a deal. They're getting all kinds of pushback on their fee and on their rates. And there's a lot of firms and companies that I've helped that do great work. Their clients say great things about them, and they're just not getting as many referrals and introductions as they know they should be getting. Which of those are challenges that you guys are running into? So did you notice any difference between the two pitches?
Now, I'll say this. I'm a marketer now, so take it easy on me, all right? But what I'll say for sure is that the first one seemed to be a little bit more, a little bit more individualistic or about the salesperson, right? The second one was a little open, right? So unfortunately, I can see it best from a marketing perspective. The second one gave me a little bit more from a vision perspective of how I can fit. So I guess it's talking a little bit more about the customer in a sense, where the first one's talking more about the salesperson, me. Right. And
me. Let me tell you about what I do. Let me tell you about why I'm great. And this is why you should be working with me. And these are all my products. These are all my services. The second one, you're absolutely right. It's all about the other person, the customer. Yeah. Now, question for you.
Yeah.
What does the other person care more about? Do they care more about problems of theirs that they can be helped with? Or do they care more about the litany of all of my products and services?
I got news for you. Especially if it's a commercial, right? And I'm sitting at a networking event. I'm not worried about you, unfortunately, Evan. I'm worried about what you can do for me.
I thought we were friends. So,
no offense, but I'm there to figure out for myself for sure.
I'll go back to something we brought up in an earlier episode, the with them, the what's in it for me.
Yep.
If I can't hit on that what's in it for me for that other person in the first 20 to 30 seconds, I'm going to get that head on a swivel. They're looking for anybody else in the room to talk to.
Yeah.
By the way, for those of you making cold calls, you really need to punch somebody in the face with the problems that you can help them with and how it's all about them. Because if you don't do it in the first 10 to 15 seconds, they're hanging up on you or they're hurrying you off the phone. So it's got to be all about the other person and what's in it for them and how they may be helped and how they may be benefited.
Yeah.
If they talk to you for the next 2 or 3 minutes after that.
And so to piggyback on that, the same thing runs true for marketing. I can't sit there and give them a list of features and benefits if I haven't figured out what their problem is in that industry. So that makes sense. I think the other thing that I picked up out of it, that you were slightly disqualifying yourself as person one, right? You're limiting yourself from a size perspective. And I talk about this from a marketing perspective all the time. Unfortunately, fortunately, post-COVID, we all have expanded our wings a little bit. So if I sit back and say, I think you were saying you're from South Jersey or something of that fashion, I've limited to my scope of it, and I'm automatically thinking, well, you can't help me over here in Texas, or you can't help me in Florida, right? So the second person, quote unquote persona, reached out further and wider and again considered my problem because I don't know what resources you have. So
Right.
the second person created a picture, created a vision of that pain. I didn't care about where you were sitting at that point.
Right. And I've got to tell you, especially post-COVID, things are much different. People tend not to care where I'm from. And if they do, then they will ask me. And then we can have that conversation. But I got to tell you, most people don't ask me. My last two clients, one's located out in San Diego, one's located in Israel. They didn't care where I was located, doing everything over Zoom and Teams. Didn't matter. But if I had led with that, better chance I would have gotten myself disqualified early on. They didn't care. They didn't ask as long as time frame set up in terms of when we could meet. That's all they cared about.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And then the final piece I want to add to it is person two. They kind of ended with an open conversation, right? They ended from a perspective of, let's continue this because we got to remember, this is a 30-second commercial. It's very easy to get locked in. It's very easy to stay in that conversation like, ooh, I got them hooked. But the reality is you got to leave them with a little something so that way you can have a deeper conversation later. I learned that taking your course, right? I learned that very quickly.
And it will make your job way easier if somebody goes, hey, wait a second, Craig, tell me a little bit. How do you drive more people to people's websites? Mm-hmm. And now you know what they want to talk about rather than you guessing, out of all of the different services, let me pick one and hope that one sticks. Once somebody self-identifies, hey, this is what I want to learn more about, now they're going to be hooked into that conversation. Selfishly, from a sales perspective, now I can be more locked in rather than being really wide. I can get more narrow in terms of some of the questions that I'm asking to, again, at the end of the day, better qualify or disqualify that person I'm talking to, and so that they can do the same with me.
So as a quick question here, have you ever had moments in a networking event or sales call where you almost over filtered them to the point where it made the next call difficult?
So typically it's the opposite. If I don't filter them down, when we have a follow-up call, it's like, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? And yeah, you were a nice person. When I really filter it down, it was, hey, Craig, when we met at the event, you were telling me a little bit about XYZ. Did you want to talk more about that? And now we can get into exactly what their issues are, what their challenges are, which I am a much better salesperson when the other person tells me what their problems are and what issues they're running into, rather than me trying to guess.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. I apologize in advance. Okay?
This is twice in one episode. This is getting a little ridiculous.
I'm feeling good about myself, Evan, so I'm going to give it to you. Ready? What are the top 3 things, and it might be a reminder, what are the top 3 things to remember about an elevator pitch? So I want them to leave, when they leave this podcast, I want them to have a very clear 1, 2, 3 steps of an elevator pitch. Go.
Top 3 things that you need for an elevator pitch. Tonality is key. You need to be conversational and not salesy. As you're talking to somebody, I don't care if you're making a cold call. I don't care if you're at a networking event. You should be talking to somebody like you're talking to a friend over a cup of coffee. Very relaxed, not formal, very conversational. 2, you want to focus on the problems that you solve and what problems the other person may be running into that your product or your service could help them resolve. Again, it's the what's in it for them, and can you help them with something? If you can, they're going to be engaged and want to continue the conversation. If not, then they're going to want to move on to the next person. The last thing, end with that open-ended question. Ask them a question because this should be a conversation starter, not a conversation stopper. A mistake that I see a lot of people make is at the end, they'll either ask a yes/no question. And if the answer is no, that's it, we're done. Or they'll just talk and then finish and hope the other person kind of picks up the conversation. If you can finish with an open-ended question, It's either going to get the other person to respond and talk more, which is going to help you either qualify or disqualify that may be a good prospect for you at this time.
There you go, people. There you go. He gave you the top 3 things, and I delivered on what I promised. The most important thing in a networking event, Mr. Evan Polin has given it to you now. If you weren't listening, you need to be watching our podcast. So, Evan, coming up, I'm going to take this part from you. We're going to start having people come in. We're going to start talking to other people. You're not going to get to be able to see our beautiful faces only. It's going to be more people. We're going to try and engage more people and ask them the questions that they have from a sales and a marketing perspective and how we can make this a better educational piece for you. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this, Evan?
I would just say that I would strongly encourage people, once this gets posted, to give us your feedback. Let us know what you think are the most important pieces of an elevator pitch. Maybe you can even share funny stories, horror stories, things that you've seen other people do, that it's like, oh my God, how does that person still have a role in sales or business development? Or, some tidbits, some pieces of advice that you could give to other people in terms of what's worked for you personally when you've been out there, whether making cold calls, going to trade shows, networking events, but what's really worked for you in your own personal career with your elevator pitch.
All right. So this is the Sales and Marketing Playbook Unleashed. You can find us on our YouTube link. You can find us on all the major podcast formats. And we are going to continue to deliver information and results and information that you guys can take in hand and run with. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, don't be afraid to add into the comments. Evan and I are not fearful of anything you guys can deliver to us. We are going to deliver the answers to you, whether you like it or not. We're going to give it to you straight because that's what we do. I'm Craig Andrews. That's Evan Polin, and we will talk to you guys next time.
Thank you for joining us on this exhilarating journey through the world of sales and marketing. Remember, the playbook is in your hands and the possibilities are limitless. Keep exploring, experimenting, and innovating, and watch as your business reaches unprecedented levels of success. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sales and Marketing Playbook Unleashed on all major podcast platforms, and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn for even more exclusive content. Until next time, keep hustling and keep winning.